She was only 11 months old, too young to speak, too young to understand fear. Yet she was forced to face death alongside the two people who loved her most, in a season meant for warmth, light, and celebration. In the heart of Christmas, when families were decorating trees and planning holidays, unimaginable violence crept into a quiet Jacksonville home. On December 12, 2017, a young couple and their baby daughter were erased from existence in a way so brutal it shattered the community's sense of safety and left a question no one could answer. They were just beginning their life together. Their love was still new, still growing, still full of plans that would never be lived. So who could carry out such an act against a family with no visible enemies, no forced entry, and no warning? Who would silence two young parents and leave their child to suffer in the aftermath? This is the haunting story of Quasean Trotter, 20, Ariyan Johnson, 19, and their 11-month-old daughter, Arielle. To understand why this case refuses to fade, you have to understand who they were before their names became headlines. Quasean was described by family as focused and protective, the kind of young man who talked more about responsibility than parties. Fatherhood had changed him. It anchored him. Arielle, bright and ambitious, had plans that stretched far beyond her years. She talked about opening her own clothing store, about building something that carried her name. Friends remember her laughter, her attention to detail, the way she dressed Arielle like every outing was a celebration. Together, they were young, imperfect, and hopeful. Two teenagers trying to build a future faster than life usually allows. Their relationship wasn't loud on social media, but it was steady in real life, centered on their child. Arielle was the gravity that pulled everything together. December had always been special for them. Arielle had been born in January of 2017, making this her first Christmas season where she could sit up, grab ornaments, and respond to lights with wide-eyed curiosity. Photos from weeks earlier show a baby wrapped in soft colors, held close, surrounded by adults who believed time was on their side. No one close to them sensed danger. There were no frantic calls, no warnings, no visible signs that someone was circling their lives with lethal intent. And that is what makes what happened next feel so calculated, so deliberate, so deeply unsettling. On the night of December 12th, the family wasn't even in their own place. They were staying at a friend's house on India Avenue, in the Arlington area of Jacksonville. It was meant to be temporary, unremarkable, safe. Arlington was not known for scenes like the one that would soon unfold. The street was quiet. Neighbors had settled into the familiar rhythm of December nights. Televisions humming, lights glowing through curtains, the air cool enough to carry sound farther than usual. Somewhere inside that house, a Christmas tree stood decorated, waiting to be part of a memory that would never happen. At around 10:30 p.m., the stillness broke. Jacksonville Fire Rescue received a call about a house fire. Nothing about the dispatch suggested a crime. Fires happen. Faulty wiring. Candles. Christmas trees. Responders arrived expecting to do what they always do: put out flames, ventilate smoke, ensure no one was hurt. From the outside, it looked like a fire that had started inside the living area. Smoke pushed outward, carrying the sharp, unmistakable scent of burning plastic and pine. Time mattered. It always does. Inside, the truth waited. As firefighters moved through the home, the scene shifted from routine to horrifying in seconds. Flames were coming from the Christmas tree, but the fire didn't explain what lay beyond it. Quasean and Arielle were found dead, their bodies bearing gunshot wounds. The realization hit fast and hard. This was not an accident. This was not negligence. This was a homicide, two of them. And then came the third discovery. Arielle. The baby had not been shot. She had been alive after the gunshots. She had been left behind as smoke filled the house, her small body unable to escape, her lungs overwhelmed. The fire that first responders were called to stop had been set after the violence, not before. The flames were not the cause. They were the cover. Investigators would later say very little. But what did emerge painted a chilling picture. There were no signs of forced entry. No kicked-in doors. No broken windows. Whoever entered that house did so without resistance. That single detail shifted the entire case. It suggested familiarity, trust, or at least access. It suggested that the danger did not come crashing in. It walked through the door. According to family members, Quasean and Arielle had been shot and killed, and only afterward was the Christmas tree ignited, likely to destroy evidence or confuse the timeline. The fire wasn't set in a frenzy. It was deliberate. It required time. presence of mind, and the decision to leave a child behind. That choice, the choice to walk away knowing a baby was still inside, would become the emotional core of the case. The detail that made even hardened investigators pause. People can argue motives. They can speculate about targets. But that moment is harder to rationalize. As news spread through Jacksonville, shock turned to disbelief. A young couple and a baby, days before Christmas, in a house with no forced entry. The community struggled to reconcile the image of a decorated tree with the reality of what had happened beneath it. Vigils followed. Candles replaced ornaments. The questions came fast, and the answers did not. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office confirmed the deaths were being investigated as a triple homicide. Beyond that, details were scarce. Investigators cited the sensitivity of the case and the need to protect the integrity of the investigation. For the families, that silence was agonizing. They wanted the public to know one thing above all else. This wasn't just about two adults. A baby had been involved. A baby who had no voice, no chance, no understanding of why the room around her was filling with smoke. Both mothers, the grandmothers of Arielle, spoke through grief that never softened with time. They described a pain that didn't come in waves, but stayed constant, heavy, unforgiving. The idea that someone could harm their children was unbearable. The idea that someone could leave a baby to die haunted them. Again and again, they returned to the same belief. Someone out there knew more than they were saying. Someone had seen something, heard something, or knew the person responsible, and chose silence. As weeks turned into months, then years, the case grew colder. No arrests were made. No suspects publicly named. Each December brought renewed coverage, renewed pleas, and renewed heartbreak. Investigators maintained that the case was active, but the lack of visible progress fueled speculation. Online forums lit up with theories. Some focused on the absence of forced entry, arguing that the killer had to be someone the couple trusted. Others pointed to the temporary stay at the friend's house, questioning whether the intended target was even the family at all. Was this a case of mistaken identity? Or was the setting chosen precisely because it offered opportunity? Neighbors recalled hearing noises that night, sounds that could have been gunshots, dismissed at the time as something else. In a neighborhood accustomed to routine, the extraordinary often gets explained away until it's too late. By the time flames were visible, whatever chance there was to intervene had passed. What made the case especially disturbing was the order of events. The shootings came first. That meant Arielle had likely been alive, possibly awake, as chaos unfolded around her. Then the fire. That sequence suggested calculation, not impulse. It suggested a person or people who believed they had time. And confidence. Confidence that no one would stop them. Confidence that they would get away with it. Public speculation filled the vacuum left by official silence. Some wondered if the crime was personal, rooted in a dispute that escalated beyond control. Others floated darker possibilities, linking the violence to broader patterns of retaliation or debt, though nothing was ever confirmed. Investigators never validated these theories, but they couldn't erase them either. In the absence of answers, the mind searches for patterns, even if they lead nowhere. Through it all, one detail refused to lose its power: the Christmas tree. It became a symbol of the deception at the heart of the crime. A symbol of how something associated with joy was used to mask brutality. The tree wasn't just burning, it was staged. And staging suggests intent beyond the act itself. It suggests a message, or at least an attempt to control the narrative. Medical findings confirmed what families feared. Quasean and Ariyan died from gunshot wounds. Arielle died from smoke inhalation. She wasn't physically shot, but she was not spared. The distinction offered no comfort. Harm doesn't always come from a bullet. Sometimes it comes from abandonment. As investigators worked quietly, the families worked publicly, begging for information, pleading with conscience. They didn't ask for miracles. They asked for truth. They asked for accountability. They asked for the person responsible to be stopped before they could hurt anyone else. Each appeal carried the same underlying question. How could someone do this and live with it? The case sat at the intersection of tragedy and mystery. Everything about it felt close. Close in time, close in proximity, close in emotional weight, yet impossibly distant in resolution. The killer had vanished into the ordinary world, blending into routines, holidays, and daily life, while 3 graves marked a story that refused to end. And as the years passed, the silence grew louder. The lack of arrests didn't just frustrate the families, it unsettled the city. Because if a young family could be eliminated without a trace, with no forced entry and no immediate suspects, then safety itself felt fragile. Conditional. Temporary. What happened inside that house on India Avenue was not just a moment of violence. It was a sequence of choices, each one worse than the last. Choices that began with pulling a trigger and ended with lighting a tree. Choices that required presence of mind, not panic. And choices that left behind a question investigators still chase, families still ask, and a community still whispers about late at night. Someone knows what happened. Someone knows why. And somewhere between the gunshots and the fire, between the trust that opened the door and the silence that followed, the truth slipped into the shadows, waiting to be dragged back into the light. The unanswered questions didn't fade with time, they hardened. As the weeks after the murders turned into months, investigators quietly retraced every step of Quasean and Ariyan's final days, trying to rebuild a timeline that had been deliberately burned away. Phone records were reviewed. Text messages were examined. Social circles were mapped. Detectives wanted to know who knew the couple was staying on India Avenue that night, who had access to the house, and who would have reason, or nerve, to walk in without forcing a door. What emerged was not a clear suspect, but a narrowing circle of possibility. The absence of forced entry remained the loudest clue in the room. It suggested familiarity, not randomness. This wasn't a burglary gone wrong. Nothing indicated panic or surprise. The killer moved with purpose. That realization shifted the investigation away from strangers and toward relationships, friends, acquaintances, people who had been in close proximity to the couple's lives. The most uncomfortable truth for families and investigators alike was that the threat may not have come from outside at all. As detectives worked behind closed doors, public speculation grew louder online. On Reddit and true crime forums, users dissected every known detail, replaying the night again and again in their minds. Some focused on the temporary living arrangement, questioning whether the family had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Others argued the opposite, that the location was chosen because it offered opportunity and privacy. Why that house? Why that night? Why leave no sign of forced entry? Each theory branched into dozens more, none fully satisfying, all circling the same unanswered core. One theory kept resurfacing, the idea that the killer felt safe enough to stay. Setting a Christmas tree on fire is not a split-second decision. It requires time, materials, and confidence that no one will interrupt you. That confidence suggested control. It suggested someone who believed they understood the environment, the routines, the risks. Someone who believed they would not be immediately suspected. And perhaps most chilling of all, someone who believed they could disappear into normal life afterward. Psychologists who study violent crime often say that the most revealing aspect of a murder is not how it begins, but how it ends. In this case, the ending wasn't an escape, it was staging. The fire was meant to rewrite the story, to turn a calculated killing into an apparent accident, or at least a confusing one. That choice points to a mind that anticipated investigation and tried to stay one step ahead. Not impulsive, not chaotic, methodical. And then there was Arielle, the baby. Her presence complicates every psychological profile. This was not a case where a child was collateral damage in a moment of rage. She survived the gunshots. She was alive after the violence, which means the killer knew she was there. The decision to leave her behind, knowing smoke would fill the house, suggests emotional detachment so extreme it defies easy explanation. Some experts describe this as moral disengagement. The ability to separate one's actions from their consequences, to view victims as obstacles rather than humans. It's a trait often found in offenders who believe their goal justifies any means. Medical findings only deepen the heartbreak. The autopsies confirmed what families already knew but could barely accept. Quasean and Ariyan died from gunshot wounds. Arielle died from smoke inhalation. She wasn't physically attacked, yet she suffered the longest. In many ways, her death became the symbol of the case, not because it was unique, but because it was preventable. If the fire had never been set, she might have lived. That single fact continues to haunt everyone connected to the investigation. Years passed. Leads dried up. Witness memories faded. And still no arrest. Each anniversary brought renewed media attention, renewed appeals from law enforcement, and renewed pleas from grieving families. Investigators insisted the case remained active. that no tip was too small, that someone out there held the missing piece. They were careful with their words, but the implication was clear. The truth was not lost. It was being withheld. The lack of a court verdict left the story suspended in a painful limbo. There was no trial, no sentencing, no moment where a judge spoke the names of the victims and declared justice served. Instead, there was silence, broken only by the family's determination to keep asking questions. They refused to let the case become a statistic. They refused to let Arielle be remembered only as a footnote. For them, justice wasn't abstract. It was personal, and it was overdue. What unsettled many observers was how ordinary everything appeared on the surface. No dramatic chase, no public suspect, no explosive revelation, just a quiet house, a burning tree, and 3 lives erased. It forced the community to confront an uncomfortable reality. Sometimes the most horrifying crimes are committed by people who blend in perfectly. People who attend holidays. People who return to work the next morning. People who carry secrets that never show on their faces. Even now, the case remains officially unresolved. No one has been charged. No courtroom has heard the evidence. And yet, the story refuses to end. It lingers in online discussions, in annual news updates, in the memories of neighbors who still wonder if they missed something that night. It lingers because someone somewhere knows exactly what happened inside that house on India Avenue. And that is where the mystery tightens. Because if the killer was someone familiar, if there was no forced entry, if the fire was set deliberately, then the most terrifying possibility remains. The person responsible may have been trusted, welcomed, and then allowed to walk away, free, unnoticed, and still silent. So here is the question that refuses to let this case rest. What detail has everyone overlooked, and who is still protecting the truth? If you believe cases like this deserve answers, kindly support the channel by subscribing, sharing this story, and keeping the conversation alive. Sometimes, justice begins with the right question being asked in the right place.